for me, I don't think I would have survived or been able to get to where I am today if I hadn't pushed myself with my skiing and mountaineering to go into those places where I was genuinely scared, stacking up good practices and not trying to do everything at once, because that overwhelms our nervous system. And it's in a way like a boundary that we create for ourselves that we fail on, and then we just drop back to just doing the things we know, which is just going running 4 times a week and keeping up the stress. It has to be something that is achievable. Like, I now train way less, but I'm so much fitter. Like, I've, since doing the breath work about the intra-abdominal pressure and the real biomechanics of breathing, and I really trained hard. I did all the nose breathing, and I could suddenly like run 1,000 meters up the mountain without any training, get outside, feel the ground, get your bare feet in the earth every single day.
In this episode, Lynne takes over the podcast to interview Susanna Walker, a postural alignment therapist based in Chamonix, France. Together, they discuss the central role of the vagus nerve, how thoughts can influence your chronic pain, what meditation is really about, the importance of patience and practice, and much more. Thanks to All You Need Nutrition for supporting this episode. All You Need is a French high-quality supplement brand made specifically for athletes. So if you like to train hard, but you want to make sure you cover your vitamin and mineral needs, or you want to supplement your protein intake with a high-quality whey product, use the code UPSIDE at checkout to get 10% off your next order. And make sure you stay until the end of the episode to learn more about All You Need Nutrition and why we decided to work with them. Now here's Lynne's interview with Susanna Walker.
Welcome to the Upside Strength podcast. Today I have the pleasure of being here with Susanna. Susanna is a postural alignment therapist specializing in fascia and trauma stored in the body. She's trained all over the world in bodywork and somatic workshops. Her practice is over in the mountain town of Chamonix in the French Alps, where she's also a barefoot trail running guide. Welcome to the podcast, Susanna.
No, thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you on. I'm really excited to have our conversation today, get to know you a little bit better, because obviously we haven't dove into many of these topics. But like we mentioned just before the podcast, you and I have a very similar approach to healing, maybe different perspectives, but I think there's a connection between all of these healing practices that Sean and I are really trying to not push in the fitness world, but just bring light to in the fitness world, because we can't really have true health and wellness without understanding our body a little bit deeper. So before we dive into our conversation, can you just give a short introduction about who you are? I read your story on Instagram and I find it truly amazing where you've come from and what you've done. So please go ahead.
Yeah, well, where I came to the Alps when I was 18. I just needed to kind of run away into the mountains because that was the only place where I felt like my head would slow down. So I had a lot of dysregulation in my nervous system, and I really needed to like push my sport. I was manic, never stopping moving. With work, I had a really physical job. Always was like that as a teenager growing up, super like never stopped moving. And I've been in the Alps ever since then, really. And I started to have loads of pain. I had problems with my sciatic, problems with my jaw, problems with my neck. So I was on painkillers for most of my 20s. Insomniac, lots of problems with anxiety, lots of problems with addiction, bouts of depression. It was really tough. And the pain actually in my back is what drove me to start looking for alternative like therapies. I tried loads of different things. Some of them worked for a little while, like massage, chiropractic, physio, everything, and nothing really stuck. And then I found rolfing, and it kind of just like blew me open. The first session that I had, I suddenly had hope that I could change, because I was terrified about where I was going to be when I was 50. Yeah, I needed my sport, and I felt like I wasn't going to be able to have that anymore.
Can you explain what rolfing is to people who might not know what it is?
Yeah, it comes out differently every time I try to explain it, but it is a postural alignment therapy that works with your fascia, so your connective tissue. And I call the fascia the skeleton of the nervous system because it's the scar tissue, if you like, of all of our behavior, how we hold our body, our repetitive movement history, and anything like huge and traumatic that's happened can get stored in your posture, like held in your fascia. And it's that like stores your behavior and your history in your body. So Rolfing physically works with the fascia, and it releases it with people's movement. So understanding and educating how they move, and maybe how your pelvis is moving when you walk, how your feet are contacting the ground. So it's an educational process with hands-on body work to release that fascia in the direction of more natural movement.
Okay, so I know that in the fitness community that fascia, we can just stretch and that's enough for our fascia. And when we talk about emotions being stored in the fascia, often it's seen as being woo-woo or not actually possible. Can you speak a little bit to maybe your philosophy around that and where you, what inspired that?
Yeah, I used to think it was all woo-woo as well.
Me too. Me too.
I grew up in a family, my mum's a maths teacher. I grew up in a family of scientists, like, and trauma stored in the body, it gets stored in your physiology because of the way you hold yourself. So if, we stressed people, just like actors walking around, they embody the emotion that they're trying to express. And that is not just held in the posture, it's held in the physiology because everything is linked together. So if you are compressed because of this fear posture, your tailbone tucked under, your plantar fascia comes off the floor, everything gets shorter. And so things move around your body less easily. Your brain is receiving this feedback that you're in a scared posture, defensive posture. And so your physiology is responding as well, and vice versa. It's all interconnected.
Right. And when you see your body is responding physiologically, that's through the nervous system, right? So the way we're holding our body, from what you're explaining, is affecting our nervous system in a way that is maybe negative, or not negative, but it's like a negative feedback loop. You're holding yourself like this, and so your body thinks you're stressed out, and so then your body goes into a stress response. Is that accurate?
Yeah, one way of looking at, so the diaphragm with the 3 hiatus, the holes that go through the diaphragm, if your diaphragm and your tailbone is tucked under, your ribs are slightly flared up and your diaphragm is slightly contracted. So it can't lengthen down to give you the full belly breath that we know so much about in healing. So you can't get the proper intra-abdominal pressure change in your organs. So the holes that that are in the diaphragm, where the vagus nerve, the very famous in charge of our nervous system nerve, that gets squished. The information that's coming from your viscera isn't able to properly go up and down, if you like. And the pressure in your abdominal cavity is not being managed properly. So you get this like dysregulation.
Right. And it's really common, again, because like I said, Sean and I really want to open up, breath work, nervous system regulation, all of these things to a bigger audience, because obviously in fitness, we think about our breath, maybe we think about our breath, maybe we don't even think about our breath and what that can do to improve our fitness levels. But when it comes to the vagus nerve, if people don't know, our vagus nerve is intertwined and connected to all of our organs. It's connected to our brain, our gut, all of these different areas within the body. And it becomes such an important part of regulating our health as well as our fitness. And so can you explain how the vagus nerve relates to our nervous system and how that can have a massive impact on our well-being?
Yeah, I'll try to.
Yeah.
So one of the big themes that I've been working with in the last 5 or 6 years is polyvagal theory. And it is a 15-year Harvard research study by Stephen Porges that has looked into the functioning of the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the thing that tells your body whether it's safe or whether it's in danger, whether it's under threat. So a simple example is when the cheetah is chasing the antelope. If the antelope suddenly hears the crack of a twig, it goes into from rest and digest when it's like eating on the plains into sympathetic activation, like alert. And we get 7% of our visual field then, because you're on high alert. You actually come out of your body. So just like the cartoon character, when you jump out of your skin, you become less aware of your body because you get ready to spring. All of that cascade of physiological reaction is telling the antelope there's danger. And the vagus nerve is in charge of that. So if the cheetah then chases the antelope, you get this explosion of sympathetic, like flight. If the antelope is caught by the cheetah, you then go into the next layer down, the evolutionarily older layer of the shutdown, the freeze response, which is a reptilian like freeze response. And that's the vagus nerve protecting the antelope from feeling what's happening. If the antelope has a chance and the cheetah gets distracted by something, there's also this like vagus nerve explosion of freeze state up into sympathetic activation. And that's when you see a good example is if a cat's like playing with a mouse and then all of a sudden a mouse goes like, whoa, scares the mouse, and then scares the cat, and then the mouse can run away. And the vagus nerve is in charge of all of that. And we're mammals, so we have all of those systems working all the time. But because of our super complicated neocortex and the fact that we live in this modern world, an email can cause that kind of stress activation for us now. So it's really difficult to stay well regulated. And understanding your functioning of your nervous system, your vagus nerve, and those activation imprints and what they feel like in the body has been absolutely vital for me to like function in the world.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that's definitely my experience. When I'm teaching the digestive system and microbiome, I have an image of an obese man running with a burger in his hand being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, trying to show that modern day society, it's our desk, it's the fast food, it's the pills that were prescribed, it's the inactivity, it's the emails coming in, it's all the input that we're getting all the time. And I think people don't realize what stress actually is in today's world. It's changed from, maybe we do understand that fight, flight, freeze activation within the body, but we don't recognize what these other emotional triggers are, or even physiological triggers could be. For example, like you said, the email. And so where do you think that we've gone wrong, quote unquote, in today's society that makes us kind of, freeze so that we don't feel?
Safety. So I took Polyvagel theory, says that, safety is healing, and safety is about interpersonal safety. So in our tribe, in our close friends, in our family, and the safety that you build in community. So many of us feel so disconnected and lonely because of the way our society is built, and safety is incompatible with fear. So if you feel safe, you cannot have this activation of the vagus nerve that is dysregulating you and filling you with stress hormones. Safety is created between two nervous systems and on the inside of your body. So I work all the time with people like, okay, what does it mean to feel safe in your body? And they have no idea because they can't remember. I lived there for a very long time. And that's the crux of my work, is trying to get people to feel safe in their body. And then amazing things happen. This opening happens in the fascia. People start to have creativity and joy and things like released. I didn't know what joy was until I was about 30. I couldn't remember it. I remember being really frustrated at these courses when people were talking about joy. So I was like, what is that? I know mania, but I don't know joy, because I didn't know safety. And it's like a stacking up of things. So to create safety for yourself and your body, some people need to have their family around them. Other people need to do yoga every day. Other people need to have, like you said about the physiological factors, the diet, all of these different factors, so that your body knows that you've got you, you're protecting yourself from all these threats that are coming at us all the time.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. So I had a lot of trauma growing up. I've talked about this recently in a podcast with Sean, but it wasn't until I was married with Sean, because I had 2 children. I was a single mom for 5 years before I met Sean. And when I met Sean, that's when I started experiencing chronic pain, fatigue, extreme levels of fatigue, that I couldn't even function anymore. And so going to the psychologist, I was like, what is wrong with me? And she very clearly said, she's like, you feel safe now. In some capacity, you feel like you can let go of all of the responsibility, all of the things that you've taken on in your life, and be able to just give that to somebody else. So I had to find a way of finding that joy again. And so luckily I had Sean, I had that safety net that I could just kind of push this onto, so that I could feel like I could take a step back. And it was through movement, breath work, yoga, doing the things and only the things that I enjoyed doing, that I'm rebalancing how I feel within my body. But it took time. And I think there's this level of impatience that's in the world, and these quick fixes that people want. And the one size fits all approach just doesn't work for people. So I really like that you brought up the fact that it's going to look different for everybody, and the amount of time that it takes to heal is going to look differently for everybody. How can this relate to, somebody who's pushing the limits, maybe in a burnout at work, or somebody who's just hitting the gym 6 times a week and not eating well, etc.?
Yeah, well, there's a lot in there. So first, I just wanted to say that it sounds like your body went through a huge detoxification when you finally felt safe. We talked about all the physiology, like storing up. So if you lived in stress for those 5 years, you weren't safe to put anything down. Like a lot of people who are pushing their sport, the ultra running here in Chamonix, the extreme sport, I used to be a steep skier here, push, 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 push. I don't feel safe to stop. And then when you do, the burnout, I see it as this detoxification as the tissues change. And that's really hard in healing. Things get worse before they get better.
Yeah, the detoxification, it was really interesting. I didn't understand what was going on either, because in my training, obviously we're taught, as a holistic nutritionist, we're looking at the whole body, obviously. We're taught about yoga, we're taught about breath work, but like you said, that was too woo-woo for me at the time. I was like, I need to stick to science. Only then will I be seen as somebody who can help other people, is if I follow the science. And so I was experiencing lots of, I would do breath work and yoga, and I'd experience lots of shaking and things. If people were watching from the outside, would be like, what is actually, like, she's crazy, she's just pretending. But it was definitely releasing of trauma. It was processing, seeing images of what I was releasing while it was happening. It was very, very powerful. And I do think there is some level of detoxification, even on a physiological level, because you're releasing toxins, you're releasing all of these things that you've been holding in your body for a really long time. I still think I'm there, in some capacity, because I was put on a medication actually that is, the equivalent of coming off of heroin. And so even now, as I'm trying to balance my lifestyle and my body, I still feel like I'm releasing some of that medication that is stored in me, some of the experience that is stored in me from that. And so it's really interesting that you say, a detoxification. I don't think we realize how much are stored in our cells, whether it be information or toxins or these things otherwise.
Yeah. And when things are compressed in either a shortening ready to spring, fight, flight, or a collapse in a depression, you see that in the body, that how can everything function well if it's smaller? It doesn't have the space to move around. So, and then when you do it, then when you find length, and that's what rolfing is about, finding that lift and the lightness that comes with everything's working together and you feel connected to the ground and to space, then there's space for everything to move. And, you know, sometimes you get these big pains of change. Sometimes you get like flu-like symptoms for a few days after sessions, you know, and that can even happen after holotrophic breathing sessions and all the different modalities. And to link it back to the really hard training, that is a sympathetic activation if we really want to succeed. And I think that has a place, you know, that for me, I don't think I would have survived or been able to get to where I am today if I hadn't pushed myself with my skiing and mountaineering. I'm not really a mountaineer, but to go into those places where I was genuinely scared, but for the right reasons. You know, and my friends who are ultra runners, my friend that's done the Tahoe 200 and was hallucinating on her, she wanted to know and push her limits. And that's how she started to learn about the functioning of her nervous system and some of her things. So I think it really does have a place in managing our nervous system, but recognizing why we're there, and why it's important to us in a emotional and psychological way to push our sport like that, I think is really important. I always see people before the Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc UTMB race here that are so desperate to get around the UTMB, otherwise they feel their life's going to fall apart, because it's this pinnacle. I've been training for this. I need it. I need it. I need it. And we know that a lot of ultra running is all I believe I can do it. If you believe you can do it, even if you've got stress fractures in your feet, you're going to get round. So much of it is mental, and I think that gives people an awful lot, and to learn about their nervous system. And then after it, you know, the months after it, when you need to slow down, is where you process all of that and start, you know, taking off what I call another layer of the dysfunction onion. Like, okay, so that made me feel this, and now I understand why I needed that, and where do I need to go next? Do I need it in the same way?
Yeah, I like to think of true fitness as, well, one word always comes to mind is responsibility, but not your responsibility in finishing the race or doing the thing. It's your ability to respond, responsibility to a situation, whether that be a race that maybe you didn't get to complete because of XYZ, or you're in a argument with your partner, or whatever it is. It's the ability to respond, whether that be physiologically, mentally, emotionally, all of those things encompassing. That to me is true fitness. And that's, I think, through my healing journey is exactly what I have been trying to get people to see, is that in this modern world, to regulate our nervous system, we have to have the ability to respond. And so we need to put these tools in our little toolbox in order to be able to do those things, whether it is through nutrition, stress management, breath work, going outside, movement. All of these things are tools that we can put in our toolbox. And so we have this reductionistic approach, I think, in modern coaching, that is, oh, well, going to the gym is the one thing that you need. This is what's going to help you. Maybe that's true for some people, but maybe it's not for others. And so recognizing what your ability is and where you need to move towards in order to find this balance. Do you want to speak more to that concept of what you think true fitness is?
Yeah, so that reminds me a bit of the atomic habits. So building in, so what you already have, say if you're already running 4 times a week, okay, what else do I need to build into that? I'm already running 4 times a week. Does that mean that every time I go for a run, I can also add in something that's a really healthy meal, because I'm not very good at eating healthy, or I need to make sure I have electrolytes with those running. Okay, so if I build one little easy thing on top, making it really easy, So stacking up good practices and not trying to do everything at once, because that overwhelms our nervous system, and it's in a way like a boundary that we create for ourselves that we fail on, and then we just drop back to just doing the things we know, which is just going running 4 times a week and keeping up the stress. It has to be something that is achievable. And for me, I look at these like well-being habits about like getting back to where we were evolutionarily not very long ago. So our world has taken us so far out of being connected to each other, connected to the earth, connected to our sense of like wellness in the body, like feeling our body, feeling what we're eating, having time to sit and stare into space, you know, like all of these things moving through the environment. We now have a very unnatural way of living often. So if you can stack up a few practices on top of what you already do that get you back towards a more natural way of living, that for me has been how I have become much more fit. Like I now train way less, but I'm so much fitter. Like since doing the breath work, Kathy Dooley in New York, I did her courses in COVID. They all went online about the intra-abdominal pressure and the real biomechanics of breathing. And I really trained hard. I did all the nose breathing, and I could suddenly like run 1,000 meters up the mountain without any training. It was so different being able to breathe properly. That was a huge piece of my training. Barefoot running as well. I've been doing that for 6 years, and that always being barefoot and being out in the grass, like, and being able to go out into nature, that helped my back enormously. Like my sciatica responded really, really well to those 2 things. And they were 2 things that I could start stacking up. I couldn't suddenly go barefoot. I had to, you know, walk for a year before I could run. And then I went running and my hamstrings were so bad I couldn't walk for a week. You know, so it's like very slowly do it. But if you stack up those practices over time, the results just exponentially just get better and better.
What do you think it is about being barefoot or grounded that you think is so powerful?
The fact that we have 33,000 receptors, I think, in the soles of each feet, and the way that our little tiny stabilizing muscles in the lower back, the multifidus, that go between each vertebral section, they are neurologically wired to turn on to those receptors in the feet. So we're quite often off our feet because we've maybe got poor footwear, we're sitting down, we're driving, and our lower back muscles get turned off. And so having that connection to the ground stabilizes your lower back. Having that connection to the ground stabilizes your nervous system, because like I said, with the tucked under pelvis in the fear posture, and anyone listening could do this now, if you stand up and you go into what I call a scared dog posture, which is where you tuck your tailbone between your legs, you can feel your plantar fascia tighten and you go more onto the outsides of your feet. So you have less awareness in your feet and less awareness in your body because you're mimicking a fear posture. And then if you release your tailbone into what I call happy dog, it's been really hard to describe this to people. And you like,
there's a video on Instagram though, I think on your channel, right? Where
yeah.
I think you're showing how this is. Anyways, continue if people want to look.
Yeah. And then you release the tailbone back, you can actually feel your feet relax. And that is you experiencing the weight spreading across your feet, and more of those receptors are in contact with the ground. And that's what's happening with barefoot, like Vivo barefoot footwear that I wear for running. Like all of those receptors are constantly being challenged by the uneven ground. And it feels amazing running barefoot in the mountains. Like I do the TMB now with my barefoot shoes with clients every summer. And you just feel like you're flying because you feel so light. You no longer have to really look where you're putting your feet. It's happening naturally. You know, my dog doesn't look where he's putting his feet when he runs. He just runs, and he runs through this wild forest with sticks everywhere and doesn't hit any of them, but he's not thinking about that. And that's where movement becomes really natural. And for me, a huge part is from barefoot.
I really like to go barefoot in the garden. And it's interesting when you dig into the science too. Like you said, obviously we have massive amounts of nerves, but we're also picking up ions from the ground, which is changing our inner physiology as well. And so for me, it's this idea of getting outside. Obviously, trail running and going for walks and things like that are beneficial for health. But I think there is this deeper connection to light, connection to the earth. In that way, I know for me, as soon as I started walking barefoot or wearing barefoot shoes, the shape of my foot changed. I can't wear high heels anymore. My back pain went away. My recovery is very different as well. Also, how I feel, as soon as I put my bare feet in the river or on the grass or in the garden, everything changes. My whole perspective changes and it's almost instantaneous. And so for me, it's one of these things that maybe Eastern philosophy sees very deeply, but we've become, like you said, so disconnected from this part of ourselves, this part that's meant to feel. Because I can see it based on, in yogic traditions, the chakra system, the root chakra is about being grounded. What does that actually mean? And I think it does play a huge role in how well we feel. So can you speak a little bit more to like where you think that we've gone wrong? Where is this disconnection coming from? And maybe, tie in some of your philosophies around that.
So it brings to mind your beautiful experience because you are able to connect in your body and you have got safety created in your life that when you go to the river, when you go outside, you can connect into your feet and suddenly feel that somatic shift that you get going into nature and going into your body. You feel well and you get that beautiful feeling. So many people don't have that because the fear is there. And if you're in fear, you can go and stand in the river like I did for so long and not get that shift because your nervous system won't let you descend. And that is my fundamental guiding principle for my work, how to help people understand their fear and start to face it in their body. The story of all of our trauma and while we got there, that's important, and that's not really what I deal with because that's for a talk therapist, and that has a huge place. But fear in the body terrifies people. Obviously, it's why we don't want to feel it. We're constantly trying to push it down. And finding a way to safely approach that, whether it's with a friend, a pet, a therapist, like approaching really feeling what's happening in your body. Often people feel it as like a rising intensity or a rising pain, a rising anxiety, like the size and the shape of these feelings of fear and the associated emotions. Really getting a sense of how that is imprinted in your body and then getting curious about it. Some people can do it on their own, but I believe the best way is with another safe nervous system, like starting to feel and tolerate those deep feelings in you, and then titrating their releases. Often it will bring up a lot of emotion. Sometimes it brings up a lot of anger. Sometimes it brings up a lot of sadness and grief or whatever's stored in there. But titrating those releases, and that's also like the getting worse before it gets better, like facing what's in there. And then being like, oh, nothing I store in my body is that scary because it's holding on to it takes so much energy. And that's why creativity and, so many other of those positive emotions get blocked as well because we're going to hold on and not show our sadness, grief, anger in our body. And starting to tolerate those in your body is, for me, the way to somatic healing. And then in your everyday life, when you get triggered, I still get these huge waves of anxiety and pain and grief, and I feel them, and I know that I have the tools to face them head on and feel the burning ball of hot iron or whatever it is when I'm feeling lonely or feeling desperate. That is there, but it too shall pass, and I let it come up. And I have my tribe, and I have my dog, and I have my nature, that I know it will pass. Now, it doesn't feel like it's going to in the moment, but I repeat it, and then that's how emotional regulation feels to me at the moment.
Do you think that we're taught to be dysregulated from a young age?
I come from the UK. Anger is bad. Angry girls are crazy. Angry men are dangerous. Whereas actually anger in Eastern medicine is a positive thing. Anger is a force of life, a force that helps protect us, protect our family. So yeah, we are not taught well to deal with anger. That's one of the hardest ones for people to accept in themselves, because they were often told they were bad for being angry. So scary, that whole sense of needing to feel loved and connected, and if I'm angry I get punished, and that accepting that in our own bodies, and then having someone else accept your anger and still love you, make you feel safe in a partnership, that's a huge piece. I'm a hypersensitive person, so I had loads of emotions and was often, you're too much, too sensitive, your emotions, you need to get a handle on them, rather than like, okay, you feel these things, what are they like? Being curious about them. Oh, you feel like you need to go run around, okay, go run around, instead of sitting down at school and getting punished for climbing the walls.
Yeah,
it's hard.
Yeah, it's really difficult. I'm a hypersensitive person as well, whatever that means to most people. But our son is definitely very sensitive, and that means that if he has an emotional day with a friend, that can totally dictate how he behaves in the classroom and how well he's able to sit at his desk. And so it's been interesting to work with teachers over the years, because there's absolutely some teachers that understand this about him and about children. And then there's some that are just not capable of understanding the fact that we can be curious about this type of person or this way of being, instead of trying to stuff it into this little box. And I think there is a bit of a difference between North America and Switzerland. I do think that a lot of the teachers or educators over in Canada are a little bit more aware, whether that's because more students over there are becoming more sensitive or more dysregulated. And so the tools that they have available to them are just a little bit deeper. But we've definitely struggled to, well, especially for me, because I'm obviously more sensitive to the fact that he's struggling within class as well, to trying to get him to understand, okay, this is the emotion that you're having, this is the thing that you're feeling. What can you do? What's your ability to respond in this situation so that somebody else doesn't have to step in? And so this emotional awareness has become a really big part of how we educate our children, actually, as well. And being conscientious about how other children might be behaving because of what's going on in their situation. And so I think it is very different from how we were raised. My grandparents were British. My mom was not raised in a way to be emotionally intelligent at all. And so it's interesting that we're kind of undoing this generational trauma, let's say, that is now being passed on from, our parents' generation and before, all the way up until now. So yeah, it's an interesting way of looking at emotions and how we're educated to actually react to certain situations.
Yeah, that was really nicely put, that we have the resources, and I feel so grateful to have been given the resources to start looking at this and unpicking it, because it is a huge energy and a huge work, and the grief that comes with it, to start becoming aware of our dysregulation with regards to how we've dealt with emotions. And I work with quite a lot of parents. Obviously, there's more and more people who have hypersensitive children. Hypersensitivity for me is related to that activation in the nervous system. Like, we become much more aware of our environment and the incoming stimuluses when we are hyper aware, hyper alert, which is in that vagus nerve activation, looking out for threat all the time. If the mother is in that state when the baby is born, and we learn from each other's nervous system, if the mother is feeling in threat, then the baby picks up on that. The mirror neurons between a mother and a baby are enormous, and that's how they're learning. And so the parents that I work with, trying to regulate their nervous system, like when the mother comes in, like noticing the mother's emotional environment and how she's breathing and how she is, that is one of the primary guiding factors, if you like, of how the child is regulating in the room with me. So we all breathe together, we all like notice what's going on, because we're learning from the parent all the time. And if we had parents who didn't know how to regulate their emotions, we never got taught that. And now we have the resources to start learning that.
Do you think people are curious enough to actually do the learning?
Yeah, absolutely. I have so many people here who are desperately trying to do the learning, but I also think it's really important to not be judgmental or frustrated with anybody who can't, including our parents, vitally, because they didn't have the resources for whatever reason, they couldn't feel as safe, couldn't create safety. And that is desperately sad for them. And even if their behavior is destructive, understanding is so important. That letting go and forgiveness piece has been huge for me in this past year, actually. And that has opened up a massive ability for me to connect with people, like letting go of the frustration of anyone who's not able to do this work. It is not their fault. If I had had a few different things happen in my life, I wouldn't be here either. I'm so grateful that I am where I am, and with regards to my emotional well-being. But I could very easily see my life have gone in a very different way if I didn't have a few of those key people and key resources that I was gifted. And I'm so grateful for that.
I definitely feel the same way. I think for a really long time, for me, it was really easy to blame my parents or my mom or our situation on my childhood and my trauma and all of these things. And it was through this journey of movement and breath work and understanding my emotions and my nervous system and releasing that I recognized, wait, like my parents really didn't have the resources. Like you said, they didn't have somebody who, well, and I definitely think like pain and everything that I went through, you said it really nicely, a gift. It's a gift. And I think that's a really hard thing, obviously, when you're in it to say, because you feel just, for me, it was really, really challenging at the beginning because it was like, why me? Why is this
Really
happening to
pissed
me?
off.
So angry, just so angry about how can this possibly happen? Because I was successful in my work, well, what I thought was success in my work. And I was moving and I was training and I was capable of doing a ton of things. And then, it wasn't until I kind of started coming to the realization that it wasn't my parents' fault. It wasn't like they were doing it intentionally to me. That Yeah, it wasn't their fault. And so with that recognition, I was able to let go of a lot of those things that happened. Doesn't mean they didn't happen and it doesn't exist in my reality. And it's not like they don't pop up every once in a while and go, oh, that happened. But through chronic pain, I realized that when you put the emphasis on the pain, you just reinforce that pain. And so it was like understanding the psychology behind that and how you are capable of undoing it. We focus on the negative way more than we focus on the positive. And so for me, that mindset shift of I'm going to start focusing on what feels good and not what feels bad. And by doing that, I was able to really let go of so many things. And when they do pop up, it's like you said, it's a wave. They come, I realize that I'm safe, I'm secure, I can let them go, I can see what it is, I can bear witness to it, and then I can just kind of let it pass. And I think that's, when I talk about the responsibility, it's like that ability to respond to the input that you're receiving. And so when you're overstimulated, that just becomes so much more challenging to recognize.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about something really interesting there about pain. We haven't really touched on that yet properly. That psychosomatic pain always used to be kind of like, oh, it's just psychosomatic pain. Like it's not really properly understood. But pain and the neurobiology of pain is that it's the data that the brain is collecting. It's from your whole environment, not just your like structural and if there's inflammation going on, or it's if the body senses danger in a joint that's moved too far, if the body senses danger from I can't work if I can't use my wrist, oh my goodness, I can't feed my family, so the pain imprint that is larger because of your environment. So that's what we're trying to work with chronic pain and things like fibromyalgia and psychosomatic pain that's not understood. There's a diagnosis that you've got undiagnosed lower back pain. It's so common. Like, why do people have lower back pain? And there's this understanding in this amazing book called Explain Pain from the Australian Nociceptive Research Institute that describes this beautifully, like why our pain is more when our nervous system isn't safe. And that's a huge part of understanding it and going into our pain, looking right at it. Like I talked about the ball of grief, but I do that also for my jaw pain when it comes back up. And for my sacroiliac pain, like, okay, let's lie on the floor. And I go right into the imprint of the pain. How big is it? What's it? Color is it? What can I receive from the body about this pain? Is it genuinely structural pain? Do I need to stretch? Or is this because I've been holding myself because something's really stressed me out? And getting curious about that. That's the way I meditate. I've never really been able to lie down and do some of the more classic meditations. For me, meditating is about changing this huge brain power that we have that is focused on the cognitive, the rational, the thinking, the word, changing that for receiving from the body. And receiving pain imprints from the body is really scary at the beginning, and often why you need a second person. But now I have that in my toolkit. It's so vital because it tells me where I'm at emotionally and structurally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really it's good that you touch on meditation and what that actually can look like for people, because I did what you're talking about, but alone. And like I said, I didn't fully understand what was happening, and that's when I started diving into yoga and trying to understand like psychosomatic healing a little bit more and what was actually happening. And I think we don't recognize how intelligent our body is and how much it can communicate back to us if we actually listen to it. And so this pain or these emotions that we're having is the direct feedback. It's it's the conversation it's trying to have with us. But if we're not listening, then we can't actually pay attention to see what it's telling us. However, if we just sit, maybe ask questions like you said, how big is it? What color is it? Where do you actually feel it? Because sometimes for me, like I'll have a pain in my leg, but then when I sit and I listen, it's actually me dealing with grief. It's gone to a different part of my body than what you would expect it to be in. And so I think meditation, we often think is, a yogi sitting on a meditation mat and doing breath work, and it can look like that for some people, but I think it's just about being curious about what your body's trying to say to you. And because we're so shut off from feeling that we don't take that time to listen. And that's definitely where I went wrong. 2 years of not listening to my body and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And then it screamed, and then it was like, enough, like we're not doing this anymore. And it decided to shut down. And so it was with that recognition that I was able to, actually figure out what it was trying to say and where I needed to pay attention in my life, the way I was living, the balance or imbalance that I didn't have. It was really powerful to recognize that that is right at our fingertips. It's available to everybody.
Yeah, if you can if you can be brave enough to look into those deep, scary parts of your body, and if you can find a way, brave enough, if you can find a way to feel safe enough to do it, yeah. And patience. So it takes so long for the body to unwind, that often when we're in this like speed doing what you just described, which is a beautiful meditation practice of the fascia unwinding. So you said you could feel a pain in your
like my leg, for example. Leg.
Yeah. So having like compression in the knee after doing a really long, hard route, and I'd lie on the floor and be like, oh, my knee hurts. Okay, let's get curious about it. It was actually coming from my mid back because I could feel it unwinding. And then suddenly you get this like searing hot pain in your mid back, even though I'm lying still on the floor. And okay, get curious about where that comes from. And then I suddenly felt my leg, the fascial tension that is the wrapping of this cling film like tissue around every cell, every bone. Anyone that eats meat, it's all that white bit that you kind of like pull off the bone. That lets go, and suddenly you feel the leg get heavy, but it's come from the release in the back, and that's that holding in the fascial tissue. It's really hard to feel this if you haven't already got some kind of bodywork practice and the patience, because we're so taken up with what we should be feeling, what we should be doing, what's on our to-do list, that having a practice that we go to, whether it's going down to the river in your bare feet, whether it's going to see a therapist, doing yoga, making yourself stand in the grass for a minute every day, whichever is your stacking habit that you're going to put in, to start getting curious about awareness, is really important. Like now I have this skill there, but I've been doing this since 2016. And in the beginning, it was completely wild and dysregulating, and all these huge like panic attacks would happen when someone touched my diaphragm. It wasn't where I'm at now with it. So rolfing really helped me because it like blew me open. But the other therapy that I'm really involved with is craniosacral. And there's a lot of osteopaths that do craniosacral therapy, and that works. And the Alexander technique, Feldenkrais, even Reiki, like that doesn't touch. Whatever works for you that makes you feel safe, that is a deep listening practice. Really, if you find a therapeutic practitioner that you relate to on whatever level, and they can connect with you in a safe way, that is a really helpful like entry point to starting to get curious about those unwinds in the body. Because a lot of people will just go, what on earth am I supposed to be feeling here? Because that's where I was at with it for years as well.
Yeah, I think you made so many good points. I'm going to go back and just comment on them. Patience. I think that we have to recognize that depending on when we arrive at this point of getting curious about our body and what it actually can hold, because the holding pattern, right, that we have, I'll give an example. Like Sean will sit at the dinner table, he'll be eating, and at the same time, he's clenching his other fist while it's on the table while he's eating, just like this, like so hard. You can see his muscles in his arm, everything. And I just tap on it so that he gets awareness of the fact that he's holding. But it's so interesting to me, like, where does that come from? What makes you feel so I can see the rigidity in his body otherwise too. And I think it comes from, years of sports and years of, having to do that. But he's always in this like rigid position. And so this holding pattern is really interesting, just to say, but the patience of undoing that is super important. And I akin it to like pregnancy. Women after pregnancy, they want to lose the weight. They want to return back to their body as it was before they were pregnant without recognizing their body has fully shifted. You're a different being now. You're not the same human that you were before. And so I kind of akin it to it took 9 months to grow a human, and went through this lovely transformation. It's the same thing. You have, maybe for me, 38 years of holding, of doing certain things a certain way that we now have to kind of undo, and it's not going to happen overnight. And so this patience, I think, is a huge thing. And the other thing that's always really stood out to me is practice. So you have a yoga practice, you have a coaching practice, you have a practice, you're practicing these things. It's not something that you learn and you just are perfect at and it will stay perfect and you can just stop actually doing. It's a practice. It's a thing that you have to put effort and time and recognition into. And so I think the word practice for me, I'm constantly practicing. I'm still practicing because I think it's something that you have to hone over time, for sure. And then the other thing you said was connection with the practitioner or connection with the modality that you're working with, because like you said, not everything is going to speak to somebody else. For example, Sean's like, oh, I'm doing lots more stretching. And I can look at that and go, oh, well, that's actually, if you paired that with breath work, that would be yoga. You're not just stretching. Feldenkrais, all of these other movement practices that we can integrate into our practice or holistic practice. I think that's really important because you need to have somebody that speaks your language or understands how you're relating to that practice. So all of those things I think are really, really important for people to understand that this isn't just something you can dive into and you're going to dive in and come back out.
Yeah, and often I will lie down and do my practice and I can't go into my body at all.
100%. So frustrating sometimes. You're like, I just want to do this. Why isn't it working? And then other times you're not trying and you're practicing without knowing it, as well.
Yeah, and the tolerance builds up. So for me, a lot of it's been with relationship, like trying to connect with people. And we talked about in practitioners finding a safe practitioner. So much of our communication is non-verbal, that the safety comes from the subliminal cues. And I always, when I'm intaking a client, we sit and we chat for a long time, even though I'm not a talk practitioner. I have to do that because I have to register, am I feeling safe with this person, or do they activate me because they remind me of somebody from my past? So my nervous system, is it safe for me to work with somebody energetically on their like nervous system level? Can I create safety? And that takes time. And when I started my rolfing practice, I couldn't actually talk to anyone because I was too scared. So it's kind of interesting to see how it's evolved. But yeah, creating like tolerance in our ability to handle new and challenging people, especially when, I have friends and colleagues and people in my life that are really activated. Like my job, I see as my privilege, my job is to be able to tolerate their incoming big influx of activated nervous system, and can I stay regulated? And that's part of my day-to-day practice. All the people that are in my life, even at the supermarket, like, okay, can I tolerate this? And if I can't, take myself away and get curious about, okay, so why did that trigger this big feeling in me, and what can I do to come back to regulated so that I can be a positive nervous system for all the ones I contact around me? It feels like my number one job.
Yeah. So dealing with energy is a really difficult thing, I think, as a coach, because when we first start out, you take on all the clients thinking that you want to take on all the clients because you need to, and not building this awareness around whether it's the right client for you. So what have you done? Obviously, there's like the emotional side of it and sitting and talking with them. What do you do to find balance in your coaching practice or in your practice?
Yeah, that's been very hard. So in taking a client, now with this pre-interview that I do, the deep transformative work of Rolfing, which is a multi-session process, I can only do if there's no pre-existing relationship. So obviously Chamonix is a small mountain town. I might know people from in and around like that, just like psychotherapeutic work, like there has to be a really strong container around it. And I now like interview my Rolfing clients and decide whether or not I can onboard them as a Rolfing client. Or if not, then I have two other session types that I offer, which are breathwork and nervous system coaching, which is less touch work. So I work educating people about their connection to their body, somatic awareness, and giving them tools. And those sessions look really different. They can sometimes be more of a coaching, like, okay, so what can you stack up on those habits? Or it might be lying on the table and, okay, this is how you access this part of you. This is what you do to regulate yourself when you feel really scared and this comes up. So the breath work and nervous system coaching is a new one that I've just added that seems to be working really well. And the other one, because I'm a massage therapist and I do neurokinetic therapy, which is all to do with your motor control system and where it gets cut off, depending on injury, surgery, or postural inhibition. So I offer massage informed by neurokinetic therapy, which is a way to educate people's movement systems. So for maybe people who aren't connected to the work of Rolfing, but really want to learn how to move differently, and they just have a different like way of looking at their body and the world, and it's maybe more like mechanical. That's the other session that I offer. So then we work together to see which is the best session.
Do you often find that when you work with a mechanical patient, let's say, or client, that it turns into eventually getting to the emotional side?
It can do, yeah. So yeah, if the safety is created and the person can feel safe being vulnerable with me, then yeah, that often happens. It used to happen because I would work with the fascia principally from all my training. That's like what it taught, and then it would come out too quickly, and the safety hadn't been created in the relationship in the practice. And that is why I tried to restructure my practice, because I do not want to destabilize anyone. Stability, emotional and structural stability is my MO. And because I know that fascia stores trauma in the system, if you go and release the fascia, you can release stuff that people are not ready to tolerate. And that's very destabilizing. That was part of my experience when I entered into this world of fascia work. And I'm glad it happened to me, but it was very frightening. And yeah, I want to give people the tools before I do that. The tools before we go into that, so they are ready to release it in a safe way.
Yeah, that's actually like the pivotal moment of me getting curious about my body and what I was holding in it happened after I went to go see a friend who works with fascia massage, yoga, breath work, and she just gave me a massage, and I was at the probably the one of the worst points of my experience with my, I don't call it an illness, but my experience. And she gave me a massage, and at the end I just broke down crying, and I cried straight for 2 days. And I couldn't like I said, she didn't prepare me for this. She didn't tell me what was happening. Not that that's a fault of her own, but I think she knew that it was going to happen, but then didn't prepare me for it. And I didn't feel scared, but I was so confused about why I couldn't stop crying. You know, I would cry and cry, and I just look at Sean, and at some point I was just like, stop looking at me, like I'm crying and I'm just going to keep going. And so it was a really interesting experience, but I think that was the moment where I was like, what the fuck just happened to me? Why am I experiencing that? And that really opened up the door to me obviously being really curious. I had read some like Gabor Mate books and things like that, as to understanding where this could potentially be coming from. But I think that preparation would have been really helpful in knowing where that was coming from.
Yeah, and the boundary thing there, the pre-existing relationship. They say you should never like roll your family because of the pre-existing relationship. So it's very hard. The most huge traumatic release reaction I ever had was when I was working on a partner, and I was just working on a tiny little scar that was here. We were actually practicing NKT together, but we were both like energetic like practitioners, and the trauma that came out of him, I did think I was going to have to call for like medical assistance. It was so big because we hadn't got safe boundaries. And the vasovagal response, huge sweats, huge shakes, like massive images, panic attack, like that came out was massive. And that we worked through it together. Luckily he had the tools, but because the boundary wasn't there, we were, you know, working at home, we were just, you know, practicing together, and that, you know, like going to talk to my mentors, they're like, well, yeah, look, you didn't put any safety in place. Even though we felt safe together, we didn't put any boundaries in place. And that those experiences are huge, and they feel like massively life-changing, and I know he's really grateful for it, but it was terrifying for me. And that's why boundaries are so important.
What kind of boundaries can people be looking for when they go to see a practitioner that works energetically?
Container, so confidentiality, so the trust that whatever comes up is not going to change the relationship. So you have this transference for your practitioner, so whether it's a massage therapist or they're going to help me. And if they don't help you, if you leave and you cry for 5 days, that you didn't help me. So I don't feel safe, and I'm really dysregulated. I've come off the ground. You know, my behavior isn't regulated because I didn't feel that I was helped. I went in for help and I didn't receive help. So the container has to be like safety. You create a contract between you of, okay, so the payment is really important. That you're going to this is how much I want for this service. This is how much you're going to offer me, and everything that happens within this room stays within this room. I'm available to you in these ways afterwards, not via WhatsApp, but via email. You can call me if you need me, like those kinds of containers. And some people, this is more of a psychotherapeutic, but like my psychotherapist, the contract that she makes has all the kind of the rules as well of like behavior.
Interesting, like what the expectation is of the client or the patient, right? I think that's really good. If you had 3 suggestions for people about how to get more curious about this or how to regulate their nervous system, what would it be?
Find a breathwork practice that makes sense for you. And it doesn't have to be long. We have 1 minute of decent concentration in our motor control center, and relearning breathing is motor control, like if you're doing it in a conscious way. So 1 minute breathwork practice as often as you can is way better than sitting down and lying for 30 minutes to do it. So building that in, and you can be doing that when you're standing at the supermarket. You can do that when you're in a boring meeting. Get that breath work minute, however it makes sense to you. If it's breathing into your ribs here, if it's counting, if it's, I'm going to imagine that I'm breathing the length of my spine. There are hundreds of different ones available. Make the one that makes sense for you. That would be my number one.
Okay.
Number 2, get outside, feel the ground, get your bare feet in the earth every single day, and as much as you can. And number 3 is sometimes harder for people to cultivate because it's the scarier one, but connection. Finding somebody who you can look in the eye, or a pet. I had to start with a pet. I couldn't look anyone in the eye until I was about 29 or 30, I think. So the therapist actually, like my somatic experiencing mentor, took my hand and she just held me, and it was like the scariest thing ever. But after that, my ability to connect changed. So trying to co-regulate through safe eye contact with another human. Safe eye contact.
I like that one. My dog doesn't look us in the eye, so he wouldn't be a good option. Yeah, because he's got trauma. He for sure does. And so he definitely has anxiety about looking at us. When he's feeling super proud and brave, he'll do it, but only for like a split second. But it's really interesting because you can get that mammalian, like you said, kind of, you can see his behavior, you can see what he's feeling. And so that disconnection and non-willingness to look us in the eye. I'm like, oh, you're not feeling comfortable right now for whatever reason. And we're working on it, but he's patience, right? Like it's the same with training a dog. We adopted him 7 months ago, and it's been a process of understanding who he is and understanding his trauma and working with his anxiety. And so it's really interesting when the universe gives you a little mirror to kind of look back in and recognize what they're feeling as well.
We have the same nervous systems.
Exactly.
Essentially.
Exactly. And so I think having an animal is a really interesting way of being more human in a sense, because it gets us outside, especially a dog. It gets us outside. It gets us connected to nature. It gets us connected to what they're feeling and our relationship between them and how they release. Like I've had him release trauma on me, just sitting and breathing together and petting him. And you can fully tell that he's having some kind of experience of, comfortability, or a certain way he breathes as well. It's very interesting to experience that with him for sure.
The play, right? So find it like play is how we learn to co-regulate as children, and that we can mimic that as adults safely with a dog. I also love to play, like proper play where you're looking someone and changing facial expressions quickly. That is an amazing way of co-regulating.
Well, and that was interesting because he didn't know how to play when we first got him. Yeah. So it's really interesting because he was born during the pandemic too. So he was not well socialized. He obviously wasn't taken out in different environments. You can see that he becomes super stressed out when, he's a very different dog in the forest than he is down in the city, or down in our little town even. So yeah, him learning how to play with us and understanding that he was safe and all of those things. It's like I said, it's been a really fascinating way of understanding humans better. Just because you can see the connection between how he relates to his environment as well. And we'll see things like, I'll lift yesterday we were walking and I was carrying a garbage bag and I lift the garbage bag up and he was like, like this bag is scary. Okay. And we've seen that, Sean will stretch with, or do some breath work with a bar on his shoulders and be going like this. And as soon as the first time Sean lifted it near him, he reacted to the stick. So obviously he was, hit with a broom or something along those lines. So yeah, it's been a fascinating journey, that's for sure. Yeah, poor guy.
We can learn a lot from studying like simpler, even though dogs are complicated, nervous systems where you're not like, oh my goodness, what's my kid doing? Or, oh my goodness, what's my friend doing? Why are they behaving like that? We've got the cortical, just looking at like basic nervous system responses in an animal helps you to understand your own, which are often like muddied with so many other, like, oh, why would somebody say that to me? Why would somebody do that to me? We have these like cortical overlays. If you just look at it from a nervous system response system, like looking at the person's like facial features, and it's easier looking at a dog like that. For me, it was like a really good way in.
Interesting. I really like that. So, moral of the story, everybody should get a dog.
Yeah,
Just
play.
kidding. Yeah,
Play
more.
more play. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What are you working on next? What's next for you?
Well, getting certified with my PT. So building intrinsic stability has been the last 8 years in my own like body and learning, and trying to teach that. And my biggest challenge is communication, like communicating what intrinsics are, everything that we've talked about today, like what that means. And the PT qualification that I'm hopefully just going to get in the next few weeks, and how I met Sean, is going to help me communicate that to a wider audience who already understand fitness and extrinsic strength and force, but maybe have problems posturally, or you get injured, or something's not quite right. I can never do a pull-up, or I can never do that. Like, okay, so we need to put intrinsic stability in first before you put extrinsics on top. You cannot build force without stability safely. So that's going to be my like communication goal for this year.
I really like that, because I do find when we're talking about, and this podcast altogether might be outside of people's understanding, because I do find that people get kind of stunted at this kind of, I don't even want to say like bodybuilding mentality, but like, I have to be able to go to the gym, and I have to be able to add this force, and I have to be able to do that. And when we start talking about energetics, or we start going deeper into the body about what stability means and how that's actually the foundation of all of these other health pillars that we stick on top of it, I always say like stability and like self-care is the foundation of all of these practices. And then you can start building all of the other structures, right? If somebody is so fatigued, they can't, focus on their nutrition because they can't get up and cook for themselves. Or if they don't have self-care or the willingness to change, going to the gym might not be a thing. And I know you mean like stability, maybe functionally, but I also think like emotionally has to be there. Like, why are you doing this? Why is this important to you? Where is it going to take you? And how that can all be wrapped into one practice. And so I think the communication that we've had is very 1980s. It's very like aerobics, cardio, strength training, this kind of, that's the language that we use. And I think that we can take it just a little bit deeper and have people slowly kind of go from that kind of world into this more open approach to looking at health and wellness and what fitness actually encompasses.
Yeah, I love that. The bridge, right? So it's not just ultra running, aerobics, or like strength training and bodybuilding, or yoga and breath work. It's the bridge between the two. And you can add into whatever you need. Like, I need to go running, I need to do my bodybuilding practice to feel okay. Okay, can we add in an element of understanding the stability of your spine, the stability of your emotional well-being, like put in a bit of breath work into that, which could like provide a lot more sustainability in your fitness practice and emotional well-being at the same time.
100%. I think a lot of people, because we're in this reductionistic world right now, we're taking away, right? We go into a calorie deficit. We go into, taking away something, not as a punishment necessarily, but because we think that taking away calories is going to help us lose weight, for example, we don't think about adding in deep nutrition instead. How do we give back to our body? How do we put money in the bank, or how do we fill the battery up? It's not about taking away, it's about adding to. Maybe that means less trail running, but you're adding another modality in, or another practice in, that is going to make your trail running or your fitness just that much better. it's not one or the other, it's and. And that's something I've been really trying to hone and help people understand in the last little while, because I do feel like it's something that's being missed. Yeah. All right. Before we end the podcast, is there anything else that you would like to add to our conversation or?
Oh, it's just been really fun. Thanks.
Good.
I feel like you really helped me talk about some of the ideas that have all been mixing together. It's really easy to get really muddled when talking about this. And if anyone has any questions, like I would always love to answer them, because they really help me learn about how to communicate this really vast and complex subject area that's only just becoming a la mode. And I'm really interested to always answer questions about it, because it helps me so much to understand myself and how to communicate it better.
So where can people reach out to you? I think you have a website and Instagram. Would those be the best places?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I'll link those in the description so that people can find you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, and thanks for your time today. I really appreciate our conversation, and let's do it again maybe.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was amazing, Lynn. Thank you.
Before I let you go, I want to tell you a little bit more about this podcast sponsor. All You Need Nutrition is a high-quality supplement brand proudly made in France. When they first reached out to me, my wife, who's a trained nutritionist, had a lot of questions about the different ingredients that they use. So we scheduled a call with Miriam, the mastermind behind the entire All You Need product line. After the call that lasted almost 2 hours, my wife was really impressed by their transparency and the quality of their products. She was excited to work with a brand like All You Need. And if my wife says yes to a supplement brand, I'm on board without hesitation. Personally, I love their whey protein. I use it after every strength session or mix it in with my yogurt in the morning when I want a little extra protein. It's not too sweet, the cocoa flavor is delicious, and it blends really well. Their one product is fantastic if you're looking for a light energy boost plus all the vitamins and minerals you might need if you're used to training hard. My wife sticks to 1 scoop, but I go for 2. Make sure you find the dose that works for you. And special shout out to their shaker bottle. It's literally the best shaker I've used in the past 15 years. We've been using their supplements for the last 2 months, and we're genuinely thrilled to be working with them. If you want to support the podcast, click the link in the description to check out their whole product line and use the code UPSIDE for 10% off on your next order with All You Need Nutrition. Take care and see you in the next episode.